Welcome to the Intimacy Lab. I'm Michelle Renee, an intimacy guide, surrogate partner, and professional cuddler. We're here to talk about intimacy in a much broader view than what you're probably thinking. Most people think about intimacy as sex. We're going to break that apart here. Welcome to the lab. Hello. I'm so excited for this conversation. We put it on pause when it came up in a personal phone call between us, and decided it would be a really great topic to record so that other people can glean from Brian's personal life experience. So today I'm with Brian Gibney, who I lovingly refer to as my work husband. We make a lot of professional babies together. So hello, Brian.
Hi, Michelle.
Do you want to let everybody know who you are real quick? Even though my hope is that you become a regular in my little circle of like cast of characters that will be joining me on this new adventure. But right now, nobody's going to know who you are unless they've followed me on, I don't know, many things. But go ahead, introduce yourself, Brian.
I'm always happy to introduce myself. So, hi, I'm Brian Gibney. He, him. I know Michelle mostly through my work as a surrogate partner, and like she said, the various babies that we have together. But I'm also an intimacy coach. I'm a sex worker. I do a lot of education and outreach and advocacy in the worlds between the talk therapy world and the touch world. On a more personal level, um, I'm non-monogamous. I'm kinky. I have been so for a long time, 20, 25 years. Um, and it's taken a lot of different twists and turns over those years. So it's been quite a ride.
So, I don't know, a couple weeks ago, I had a friend over and we were cuddling here in my studio because I am incredibly sensually attracted to him. That's a whole nother conversation that I'll probably have in an episode about the difference between sensual attraction and sexual attraction. And I popped out to use the restroom. When I came back in, he said, "Tell me about this poster that you have on the wall of your office." And this poster says, "Loving relationships, nature's order versus culture's order."
Mm,
And um, I keep this in my office to remind me to slow down in my work. And so, number one at the top in nature's order is safety. Number two is proximity, meaning we get closer together in physical space. Three is touch and sex. Four is bonding and love. And then, of course, culture's order is exactly the opposite. We move
hmm
from the bottom up of bonding and love, which I think of as like I met someone, I create a story about them, I fall in love with that story, right?
right.
And
And
then,
your identity in that story, right? Like we are a
yes,
couple, we are dating, right?
you've got a whole story about them. And then you move to touch and sex, and you want all this time with them and closeness. And then you're like, but why do I not feel safe?
hmm
Right. And
hmm
so much of our work is about creating the safety component. And it feels
Oh, I
foreign
can't
to
wait
a
to geek
lot of
out about
people.
this.
It feels so foreign to people
Yeah,
because
yeah.
we've gone into this hookup culture where I personally, when I was dating, I practiced a lot of, one night stands, and I have no issue with that kind of relating. But I do wonder now that I have the background that I have, what it would be like for Michelle to date
hmm
now
hmm
versus back in, say, 2014, 2015, when I was really active in the dating world and kind of getting a feel of what does Michelle want post divorce. And I don't know what would look like in the dating world, but guess what? Brian is actively dating, and Brian
Hello.
and I have a lot of similarities. I was a self-proclaimed slut back in the day, and I still am mentally. Like, I think that I aspire to a certain sluttiness that I just find myself not acting on for multiple reasons. But Brian, when I brought this question to him, because the friend asked, let me back this up. The friend asked, "Okay, but Michelle, How does that look in the real world? I know how it looks
Mm.
in your professional world, but how do we go about establishing safety when we meet a new person? And I started to like think about things, and the closest I came to, and you might laugh at this, Brian, was
Okay.
taking our food mandala into a
Mhm.
restaurant situation. That was the best I could come up with because I'm not in the dating world. And I said, you know what? Let me talk to Brian. I'm sure Brian has a great answer for this. And so, hence this conversation.
I don't know if I have a great answer. I will
You
have
have an
an answer.
answer.
I have lots of considerations, lots of, like, stumbling through things. Um, Before I even talk about this, I do want us to say something about what you said before about hookup culture, and I think a lot of people assume that hookup culture is just having one night stands, right? But I think even the folks that are not doing one night stands, I think it's a different kind of hookup culture. Like they are dating to find a mate, and like you said, have like insert themselves into that story. Um, so even if it's not casual sex, there is dating into a story. There's dating to do this thing that is subtext to the relationship itself.
Okay, let me premise my
Yeah.
comment then. When I was dating, I looked at everything as a one night stand that could turn into something else,
Mm,
right?
okay. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So both of my well, I'd say I had 3 relationships post dating. I did a lot of dating and I did a lot of fucking.
Mhm.
But I think I hung out with one guy for like 6 weeks. It was fun. Um, Second guy was over a course of years, as a polyamorous person. I'd say we are still connected in some way, even though I wouldn't consider us dating anymore. And the third one is now my husband, and I will say they all started out as one night stands because I
Mm,
didn't know if anything was gonna happen after that. I didn't go into it looking for it to happen, but being open to it,
okay.
right? So
Okay.
that's in my head, hookup culture is interchangeable because that's how I
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
practiced it. So thank you
That's
for clarifying that for others out there.
And that's fascinating for me because, like, as someone who identifies as a slut, that's not how I date at all, right? And I've had this conversation with several of my partners about, like, I am slutty. I like having intimate relationships with many different people, and that intimacy may be physical intimacy, sexual intimacy, like emotional intimacy. But like when I'm dating, I'm not even really there yet, right? Um, and can I just like go into like what dating looks like for me?
Go for it.
Um, I think most of the time when I'm introduced to a new person, it is probably through a dating app that I'm on, right? And we match with each other. I am in a relatively small community, so finding other non-monogamous folks, um, people are usually like, "Oh, okay, you're non-monogamous, cool. Like we should talk." But people often come to me not with a lot of experience in non-monogamy, or identifying as sluts themselves, and they're like, "Wow, like the stuff that you say on your profile is really bold." I put myself out there right from the very beginning. You know, I identify as a sex worker. I identify as a slut. I say upfront, like I have multiple relationships already. Um, and when we start to have conversations, when we start to chat, very soon in the conversation, it's like, are you curious about this? Is this something that you have experience in? And like you want to find more people in that community so you can find kinship. Um, just to gauge where people are, where I like, are we actually on operating on the same level? Um, I've noticed that a lot of people contact me because they're just curious, right? Like I have the long flowing hair and my profile pictures, and people are like, "Oh, you have such beautiful hair." I'm like, "Buddy, have you read my profile? Right? Do you know what I'm about?" And they're like, "Actually, I haven't." I'm like, "Okay, so Google some things that you see in there that you're not familiar with, and then come back to me."
So
And
this
like,
happens on the other side too. I just wanna say,
oh,
like, that was I mean,
absolutely.
that's my experience back from the dating apps, but also my experience from, like, FetLife or wherever, like,
Yeah.
people don't read. Even my
And I don't,
Cuddlist profile, people don't read.
right. I don't know if my experience is really indicative of everybody else's. Because I have a picture of like me doing circus stuff. Like it's, you know, that's not typical. Um, but yeah, 9 times out of 10, people do some Googling, or I explain, like, the work that I do, or I explain, ethical non-monogamy, and they're like, "Oh, peace out. Nope, that's not what I want at all." Cool. Great. Like, we have come to an understanding this is not gonna be a good match. And the rest of the people kind of fall into one of 2 categories, which is, like, I'm already in this community, I already have experience in this way of life and this mindset. Um, I just want to meet more people like this, whether we want to fuck or not, right? Or I've never really felt comfortable in monogamy, and I'm really curious about learning about your experiences in non-monogamy. Usually, if we've matched at that point in time, there's like an acknowledgement of like some kind of chemistry or curiosity, right? Like, oh, you're kind of cute. Oh, you're kind of cute too. But when I date folks, it's almost never like let's bang, right? It starts with that curiosity.
Question, can
Yeah.
I pause you?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Was that the case before you started doing this work?
That's a really good question, and I think I was coming to it organically before I started the work, and the work absolutely fast-tracked it because I definitely there was a point in my early non-monogamy where I was like, "Yeah, let's go out and let's fuck and, like, let's jump into it," because we're all sex positive people. And that just really didn't jive well with who I am as a person, the kind of the shape of the relationships that I wanted. Um, so I messed up enough times to be like, maybe I need to rethink my strategies here. It's not working out. And it's not that anything in that was harmful or unsafe, but it wasn't really speaking to the kind of relationships that I wanted. So there's that.
I probably would have got there with enough time.
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah. Um, But so when I am dating people, when I'm talking about the potential, like, to go on a date with someone, I'm usually really upfront where I'm like, "Hey, I would love to meet you over coffee, and let's see after that if we want to meet again, get to know each other, if there's chemistry," right? There's always when you're dating me, there's like this built-in pause button at the end of the first meeting. Even if like the there's a lot of chemistry. It's like, "You're hot. Okay, cool. Like we recognize that in each other. Let's see if we feel the same way tomorrow."
I do this in
But
my work,
yeah, 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 yeah.
right? It's like we
Um,
don't renegotiate in the middle of
mhm,
a scene or a session or now you're saying, like, you've got a very clear, "We're gonna pause and let the hormones chill out
mhm.
and let us get our brains back to baseline, and then we're gonna make some
Yeah,
decisions."
and let's see what we really want, right? Like, are we compatible as far as our relationship goals? Are we just horny and we want to fuck each other? Like, is one or the other of us coming at a from a place of scarcity? Um, And that happens a lot when I am dating other people that, like, I am not operating from a place of scarcity at this stage in my life. Like, I am fairly polysaturated, um, but often people that come to me are just coming out of long-term relationships or coming off of, like, a self-imposed, period where they're not having any sex or any partners, and they are ready to go. Um, So more often than not, I'm the one who's like, okay, let's pause and reassess. Um, which is
So you're gonna ask them the difficult questions,
yeah,
is how I'm interpreting
yeah,
that as like, "No, let's actually be upfront and honest. What do you want out of this?"
yeah. And
Yeah.
this is something absolutely that I have that has been informed by my work. Um, like to ask those questions, to slow down, to like not assume anything, right? Like what kind of relationship style are you looking for? How often do you want to get together, right?
What does this mean to you?
What does this mean to you, right? What kind of place am I going to hold in your life? And these are things that we talk about in that like first coffee. The looks on people's faces, they're just like, you're what are we talking about? Like you're blowing my mind. And whether we decide to meet again or not, um, almost everybody that I've gone on a date with has been like, I have never had a first date like that. Um, which I think is pretty cool, right? Like I don't want to spend a date talking about the weather or small talk stuff, sports teams or what movies we like or whatever, right? Like I
Or
want to
the
talk
the
about
work that we do can really take up a lot of space because people are
mhm.
super curious, and then it
Yeah.
becomes the Brian show or the Michelle show,
Mhm. Mhm.
right?
Yeah, so even if I talk about the work, I talk about the work in a way that like brings it back to like and this is how it informs my relationships, right? This is what like my life looks like. Do you want to be a part of that? That's a lot of conversation, I think, that I have with folks. You know, I have multiple partners. I do this work. I'm a dad. Like, where do you see yourself fitting into this? Um, and I really want to have a conversation with them about their lives too. You know, do they have any partners? If they don't have any partners, like, what what are they motivated to explore in relationship, and what kind of need do they have? Like, I want to know that in the very beginning too.
This reminds me. Oh, do you remember when I had that therapist that wanted to be friends after we ended our
Mm-hmm.
client
Mm-hmm.
work together, and we sat down, I mean, after I ran to you and said, "Okay, Brian, what are the monsters under the bed that I should think about?" And we sat down and just had a negotiation. What are we looking for in friendship?
Yeah.
And how do you show up as a friend? And how do you show up as a friend? And is there overlap there? And it felt so mature. Like,
Right.
this is the most adult thing that maybe
Mm-hmm.
I ever done
Mm-hmm.
at that point, and so it's so cool to think that you're doing it also on the first date because it makes total sense.
Yeah, yeah. And like it really sets the tone for the rest of the relationship, right? So we got into this conversation about safety, right? Like for me, safety and integrity are completely linked. Like I am showing up in agreement with how like the words that I am telling you, right? So if in the first date I say this is how I show up in a relationship, then in the future we get to say, okay, is this actually what we're doing here?
Mhm.
Right? And if they're showing up differently, I say, okay, like we had this conversation before. Do we need to reassess the relationship? Do we need to talk about like things are like our priorities are different now? Or are you finding there are some things that like maybe you didn't have a lot of self awareness about, which happens, right? Like
We
nobody's
get to
fault.
change our minds,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
And you don't
So
know what you don't know.
yeah, so like leaving room for that, leaving room for people to evolve, for relationships to evolve, but also like being really intentional, communicating with each other about like this is what I want and need right now. This is what I want from you. This is what I like. This is how I can show up, whether it's my capacity, emotionally or time wise. Um, you know, there are some partners that I've started a relationship with. They're like, I like really want to be your friend. Like, and I could see this developing to something more, but like I am in a very asexual part of my life right now. Like I'm just not feeling that kind of draw. And I'm like, cool. Like depending where I am, the conversation might be like, I would love to have you as a friend. Or like where my bandwidth is with other partners is like I'm leaning into these relationships. Maybe we'll have a little bit of time for you, but not a lot of time for you. Right. Like
Yeah,
we
I wanna make space for the asexual community to remind everyone that relationships, especially in the poly world,
Mhm.
don't have to be sexual
Yeah.
relationships,
Yeah.
right? So if you were like, I think I have really strong feelings for you, I mean, you wouldn't know that on a coffee date, but as the friendship progressed, right? Like for a lot of people in the poly world, that doesn't preclude them from being in a partnership.
Yeah, and, one of the things that I look for when I'm dating is not a romantic relationship, but it's kinship, right? It's like, are we on the same level? Do we have the same values? Um, so even though I'm slutty, like, if someone is like, okay, example, met someone on a dating app and went on a coffee date with them, and they're a lovely human being. It turns out that we had like run into each other years before, and like we're just like, I recognize you. Okay, cool. Um, we went on a couple more dates, and had some like fun cuddle dates. Really enjoyed talking to each other. Um, did some smooching, and then as we are in these early phases of our relationship, they turn to me and they're like, "So I think I might be a little bit more queer than I originally thought." I'm like, "Cool. What does that mean for us?" Like, "I don't know." It's like, "Okay. Like, do you want to fuck me right now?" Like, "I don't feel like I need to do that." I'm like, "Cool. I still enjoy your company. I still want to spend time with you. Um, let's just put fucking off the table for now." So we continue to have this amazing friendship. I remember the first Pride they went to. They called me up and they're like, "I really want to go butch, right? I really want to show up as my masked self, and I have nothing in my wardrobe." And like they were like a very like tall, um, tall woman and or femme person, and like they were like, "Can I borrow some of your clothes?" So we like raided my closet, and like found a good like mask look for them. Like that was as satisfying to me as anything else in the relationship, right? To like see them come out of their shell and see like this is what they're evolving into. Um,
This is where I get hung up on the labels, right? Because um, I don't identify as polyamorous,
mhm,
but I have my kind of like inner circle of people that would probably fall under some form of partnership
mhm,
in
yeah,
a lot of different ways, right? Like you and I even, we have a very lovely relationship that is primarily based around work, but I know so much about you, you know so much about me. Like total inner circle person,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
lovership of ways, right? That is an
mhm,
old term I used to use a lot back in my early exploration days. Like I get really tired of the labels, and I understand why they're
yeah,
necessary,
yeah,
but I also don't live in a I think about my old monogamous life back pre current version of Michelle when I was, in Michelle 1.0. And, like, it was not a relationship where I was encouraged to have this depth of relationship with my friends.
mhm,
The
mhm,
intimacy, the non-sexual, I'm talking, like,
yeah,
emotional intimacy that I have now would never be
yeah. Well,
encouraged.
that's reserved for your partner, right? Like
Right.
that's what we're told. That energy goes to that one person in your life.
Yeah, and I just don't do that now.
Yeah, and I like my relationships. Like there's a ebb and flow between friendship and sexy partner and romantic partner. Um, and at any given point in time, like there might be one aspect of that that's on pause, and then like it might get rekindled later or not. Like we talk about this a lot, like how scarcity and scripts play out in relationships. Like I have like really in the past couple of years untangled a lot of the scripts. I've unscripted my life, like, and just being really present with folks and seeing where they are and what we want. Um, I've had
What does it take to be labeled a partner in your world? I'm curious.
oh oh um so I almost always have a modifier with the partner, right? It's not just a partner. Um, so um, I have in my life someone that is like a I'm a relationship anarchist. I don't do hierarchy in relationships. That just doesn't fit well with how I like to do things. But I have someone who is probably more looks like a primary partner, or more of a nesting partner, or a domestic partner. Um, I have people in my life that are sexy friends, sexy partners. That feels different from someone that I would consider a lover, right? Where there's that kind of like romantic component. And we often have like my people and I have these conversations of like, if we are going to identify each other in this relationship, like where would we be? Would we be sexy friends? Would we be lovers? Um, and it's fun to have those conversations because usually there's a realization of like, oh, how we started off, or how we like when we had this conversation 3 months ago. I'm feeling a little different right now. Like, you started off as a sexy friend, and I'm feeling like some lover feelings right now. And then there's usually like some wiggles and like, oh really? Is that what you're feeling? Um, and it can just as easily go the other way. I have a lover in my life, and um, she uses the term repotting, like repotting plants. Um, like when a partner doesn't fit in this pot anymore, it's time to give them another pot. It's time to give them another home.
I love
Um,
that.
yeah, and
I'm gonna borrow that because that I always say renegotiate, but that just
but
sounds kind of
it's
like
a yeah,
businessy.
yeah, yeah, and like repotting is like so gentle and like feels like domestic and nurturing.
I'm
Yeah,
writing it down right now on my Post-it
nice,
note.
nice. Um, yeah, so like I had a repotting conversation with this lover a couple of months ago, like 8 months ago. When I got very sick, um, and I was flat out like barely able to move for like a week straight. And I don't usually get sick like that. And I hadn't asked for her help. I hadn't asked to be taken care of. And that was really hurtful to her. And we had a conversation of like, what's what space do you think you occupy in my life? Right? It like that sounds really harsh, but also
It's
like
managing expectations.
yeah. And like, what do you think I need? Right? It's getting back to Betty Martin's Wheel of Consent, right? Like, you think you're giving a gift to me. What gift do you think you're giving, and is that a gift I really want?
Mhm.
Right? And that was a hard conversation. Like, she had never had a conversation like this before. Um, and it pinged a lot of relationship insecurity that she had. And at the end of the conversation, or towards the end of the conversation, she was like, I get it. I'm getting the hint. Like, you just don't want to be in a relationship with me anymore. I'm like, no, no, that's not what we're talking about at all. Like, what I'm saying is, I want to be in this kind of relationship with you. Like, I don't feel the need to have this and this and this component. Right?
Mhm.
If you feel the need to have that and that component, let's talk about it. Let's talk about why you feel that need.
Mhm.
Because when we first started going out, when we first started being sexy friends, one of the things that was great about our relationship for her was that she was incredibly busy. She's on the spectrum, so she has limited emotional bandwidth. And she's like, great, I get to see you once a week for a concentrated amount of time and not think about it anymore. But somewhere in the mix, something changed,
Yeah.
right? And my rejection of her gift felt like a rejection of the whole package. So we got to talk about that. I mean, hell, we're still talking about it 6 or 8 months later. Or 20
Mm.
years 20 years ago when I started being non-monogamous, or like when I was, a teenager and I started dating. No way I had these conversations.
Yeah, I mean, it's the slowing down factor.
Yeah,
I
yeah, yeah,
mean, this is like I'm in my head going, "Ooh, the title of this episode is gonna be like something like, 'What's it like to date an intimacy professional?'" That,
right.
a really, well, like, I don't want to say all intimacy professionals ever about anything, right? But what's it like to date this the wheel of consent background specifically really starts some really interesting conversations with
Yeah.
that question of who is this for? And like you said, is this really, who's this gift for?
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, and I often tell partners, like, I wanna unfuck relationships. I wanna look at the scripts that we have all been taught are normal and be like, "Why are we doing this? Like, why
Yeah.
do we have this expectation that we have to do this? Why do we have the expectation that we celebrate anniversaries? Why do we have the expectation that we, um, you know, go out on a hot date night, whatever that looks, like go to an expensive restaurant, buy some wine, stuff ourselves, and then like
Why
that's
aren't we
what
having
dating looks like."
sex?
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Why the whole Dan Savage, you gotta fuck first,
Yeah,
people.
yeah. Well, and so that comes up in conversation a lot, and so many of my partners, we like we have our sex schedule worked out, where it's like, okay, my body actually wants sex organically at this time of day, and I have this kind of freedom in my schedule at this time of day. Like, let's work within that those ranges rather than being like, oh, we have to go out, we have to stuff ourselves first, and then we talk. That doesn't
Or
feel
it's not
great.
a date if we don't fuck.
Right, right.
Like, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I the expectation thing, and here's the thing I wanna say, is, like, I'm a big proponent of everybody doing relationship the way that it works for them.
Mhm.
My definition of partnership, I've found through, reading other people's books like Jessica Fern and Polly
Yeah.
Secure, I had a light bulb moment where she asked people to negotiate, "Do you want this to be an attachment-based relationship?" And my brain exploded because I was like, "People have relationships that aren't attachment-based?"
Ooh, talk to me more about that because that's like, I'm curious.
Yeah, so, attachment to me, this is just completely through my filter of what I
Mhm,
remember because
mhm,
my comprehension is shit. I just wanna preface this that you may have read the book and had a completely different, interpretation. But I think of it this way, this is the way I compare it. My San Diego wife, Sarah, if I don't hear from Sarah for 2 weeks, I don't think anything of it. A question of, are we still friends? Does she still like me? None of that happens. My partner, Paul, we've spent a lot of time long distance over the course of our relationship, and if I didn't get a good night text from him, I was, like, in spiral. Are we
mhm,
breaking
mhm,
up? So while Sarah is very much in a category where if I was practicing or declaring myself polyamorous, Sarah would fit as a partner of
mhm,
some sort. But for me, I say I joke, and this is maybe like I could work on it in therapy, I suppose, said with a big eye roll as I love therapy, but also do a lot of my own processing constantly. For me, I am very attachment monogamous. And so
mhm,
that's why I don't take reading this book was where I went, oh, now it makes sense why I don't take the label of polyamory because a relationship for me feels like it's about where is my attachment.
mhm. I'm gonna get super geeky for a second, about, like, language and stuff like that, because when you and I can be using the same word attachment, and it can mean completely different things,
Absolutely. We talk about attachment theory. You
right?
could talk about the Buddhist and being,
Mhm,
away
mhm,
from
mhm.
attachment and things like there's so many it's like love means
Yeah.
a different thing to everyone. You say romantic, what does that mean? So yeah, that's where I go, but please geek out with me.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, like, because 'cause I've had these conversations with partners too about, like, what attachment, what dating, what labels means, right? Because if I say lover, I have a very certain picture, like a picture in my mind of what that looks like. And if I say sexy friend, if I say I'm attached to this person, they all look certain ways. Um, but almost never is that exactly what the people like. across from me are thinking too, right? So like when I ask someone like, "Do like how do you feel our attachment is?" Right? Just like what you were saying, like there are different kinds of attachment for different people in my lives, and I consider all those people attached, just with different rules, right? Like not let the rules are ever really static, but like we how that attachment plays out is different from partner to partner. So there are I have satellite partners that I have not talked to in months. And I know that if I were to call up, we would be able to start up a relationship and just be like there for each other. If something shitty went down in my life and I needed to talk to them, they would be there. And vice versa. But like day to day stuff doesn't need to happen. And like
Same.
you said, there are people in my life like if I'm not contacting them on a daily basis, it's like wow, I really feel that loss.
Yeah. It's all language, it's all
Yeah.
labels, it's all these I don't know. I love the depth of relationships that I
Mhm.
get to develop and nurture, and Paul and I have just decided not to use the labels around polyamory,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know? And I joke, this is the way I describe it is my poly friends think I'm monogamous and my monogamous friends think I'm poly. And I'm okay
I
being
think
in the gray zone somewhere.
I think you are very poly in like the most academic sense of the word of like many loves, right? Like there are lots of people that are loves in your life. Um,
Absolutely.
you're just not fucking them, and that's okay.
I don't even think the fucking part is a part of it because like I certainly have people that I would call satellite lovers.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I'm not in a place personally right now where I'm, like, stacking them up, but I'm optimistic that things in me will shift as I keep growing and changing, and I'm just in a space where I feel pretty hmm, I'm never gonna be sexually monogamous,
Right.
like to the real like, the regular definition,
Oh,
um,
please.
but I have my own definition of that,
Mhm.
and, and it works for us. It goes back to that do the thing that works for you. And if you're
Yeah.
talking about it, like here's a fun example of how easily we talk about it in my household. I was painting last weekend, painting a wall in my bedroom. I think my bedroom is incredibly sexy now, and I feel very good getting into bed every night. And as I'm painting, my husband comes in and says, "So I'm filling out this application for this play party and I have to describe myself." And he comes up with this really intense description of like all these different, code words, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And I just go, "Does it feel good to you? Go for it." Like, and he goes, "I just love how easy this is."
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I don't even stop painting while we're having this discussion of like how do you label how you show up in the sexual liberated world or the relationship liberated world. And it just doesn't I don't even pause to, like, really, like, make a thing out of it. It's just this, "Yeah, sure, okay, but I gotta get back to, like,
Right.
cutting in this color,"
Right. Right.
right? Like,
Priorities. Priorities.
it's just no it's normal for us to talk about it, and we've never set, like, "This is what we are, and we're gonna be this way for the rest of our relationship."
Mhm.
We've made a real, um, conscious effort to renegotiate our relationship on the regular,
Yeah.
to check in about how it's going on the regular, that these are not set in stone. This is what our relationship is. It's just it's permeable.
Mhm.
There's an ebb and flow to it.
Yeah. And then, oh, like looping back to like what we started talking about safety, like that feels safe to me. Like having that freedom to redefine the relationship, it is like a huge weight off my chest. And that doesn't mean I'm not going to get sad or they're not going to get sad, right?
Or
We can,
disappointed.
or disappointed. We like, we'll fucking handle that, right? But I, the worst thing that could happen for me in a relationship is that the outward appearance of the relationship doesn't jive with my feelings of the relationship. That feels awful. So, like, in
Yeah.
service to that, I would much rather take those little dings of this expectation doesn't get met. I have a no or something like that because it just feels so much better.
If you're afraid to be disappointed, you're never gonna have real intimacy
Yeah.
because there's always going to be a wall.
Hmm.
There's always going to be a mask between what you really want and what you're willing to say out loud.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. People ask me like what I look for in a partner, and I think they're assuming like a certain type of physique or look or like comfort with sexuality or something like that. And like, yeah, like general sex positivity is definitely a big thing in my life. But like an ability to navigate changes, um, an ability to be like adaptable, like those are really the biggest characteristics in a partner that I look for. Like communicates well, self-aware, adaptable, um, like has integrity, so their like actions line up with their words as best as they can. Those are things that I'm really looking for.
That starts on date 1, right?
Yeah,
Because you're
yeah.
having that conversation and they're gonna self-select out if that feels
Mm-hmm.
overwhelming
Mm-hmm.
or incredibly foreign or they're not ready to stretch.
Yep. Yep. That usually shows up when people are like, I don't think I can handle you. And I'm like, you are probably right. You cannot handle me.
Trust
And that's
that,
and that's okay. Yep.
right?
Yep. And people come to me. I'm like gesturing at myself. Come to me for this,
Mhm.
because I do present in a certain way. Um, and they're like, "Ooh, what a yummy treat."
I've been there.
Yeah,
I
thank
got
you.
rid of that thought about you, just but that's okay. I still think you're yummy in all
I
sorts of other
I
ways.
appreciate it. Um, but like the people that are willing to overlook those warning flags of like this is not in alignment with what I want to get to that yummy treat, like that doesn't feel good for me.
Well, that's not really relating.
No,
That's
no.
consumption, and there are
Mm,
ways to get consumption,
right, pay me.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, I think as you're saying that, like my oh wow, okay, I just made some fun connections. Like the experiences that I had with people who were trying to do that in a relationship with me, and the experiences that I had with people that were um, observing me as a circus performer, and then wanting to like interact with me after a show, and seeing me as this one little niche thing, this trope, this like singular facet of myself, um, feels very similar.
We are
Hmm.
full people
Yeah,
that are in touch with all the little crevices and corners of our psyche. At least I think of myself that way as like on a regular basis I'm touching on some of those spots. And I want someone who wants all of those
yeah,
pieces. The good, bad, and the ugly.
yeah. I don't know if I need someone who wants all of those pieces.
Well, I'm saying they have to accept me for all of those
Right,
things.
right, right, right. Hmm.
I think that's the beauty of polyamory, right? Is
Yeah,
that there doesn't have to be complete overlap. The Venn diagram does not have to completely overlap. And I don't even think in monogamy it has to completely overlap. But I do think that I shouldn't have to hide a part of myself to be in relationship. Like I'm a
right, right.
crier. Like I am
Really, I
super in
haven't noticed
touch.
that about
I'm
you.
so in touch, Brian. I don't know if you know this about me.
Yeah, yeah,
My gosh, if somebody ever cracked into our Marco Polos, there would be like just Michelle sobbing. Um, but if I had a partner that couldn't hold that part of
yeah,
me, we
yeah,
would not be compatible.
yeah.
Even my work relationships, if you're uncomfortable with Michelle showing up in all of her different feelings,
Not gonna be a
you're
good
I
match.
I'm not gonna be safe with you. And
Hmm.
I've not I do have people in my life that I hold those parts back from, but I will say that it's their loss, because they don't feel safe enough for me to show up
Yeah,
fully.
yeah.
And that's how I create my safety. They lose out on a part of me, and I would not do that in my dating world.
Yeah, same, same, same. Yeah, it's interesting, like, my priorities in the people that I interact with, like, I have a lot of intimacy in my life, but relatively small circles, because I don't want to filter myself in that way, right? Like, I don't wanna chop off parts of myself because that doesn't really fit in with a relationship. So I gravitate, like, I invest in the relationships where I can show up as my most self. If people can't handle it, like, okay, that's fine.
Yeah, I'm like the ring of a circle or the ring of a tree, right? And
Mhm,
or
mhm.
sometimes I've looked at it as like a molecule. And those people that I'm closest to are the people that I let them hold space for me, because
Mhm.
otherwise, because I'm a professional, I'm always holding space.
Yeah.
And it's a choice if I let people hold space for me. And that is kind of how I decide who is in the inner ring, or
Yeah.
the
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
nucleus of my world.
I think I'm very similar.
Hmm. Does that feel like a good spot to wrap this?
Yeah, it feels wrappable to me. I think we
Do
can.
you feel like we've answered the question of how does Brian date?
I think so.
I
Yeah.
think so. Yeah. It's so funny. I thought you were gonna come in with like, so I sneakily do this little exercise that I learned at what but like I said, food mandala at the restaurant. And one day, we'll figure out how to explain what the
Yeah,
food
yeah,
mandala is. But I like that I'm sitting here going, well, duh, of course this is how Brian dates.
right. If people wanna do exercises, so they know the work that I do, I want them to opt into it,
Oh,
right?
sure.
Yeah, I'm not saying, "Hey, on date 1, let's do this," right?
Well,
Like,
there's a difference between, are you worthy, like worthy, that's not the right word. Are you someone who qualifies as a peer,
mhm,
or are you someone who should be a client, right?
I don't wanna date clients.
I found myself with one of my friends saying, I find myself wanting to fix you,
Mm.
to make you my next project. And so I'm going to not do that. That's my boundary to
Yeah,
figure out,
my
right?
my gift to you is to not put our relationship in this box.
Exactly. It's like, I imagine this is what it's like when you try to date like a talk therapist, right? Is that, my partner and I don't sit at night and do the 3-minute game or things like that. Now, occasionally we've talked about we should bring it back into our practice just because it's a fun thing
Mhm, mhm.
to do together. But I don't think of it from a place of, I need to teach you this skill so that we can relate better. Like
Right,
like I would
right.
with a client.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, you can't I can't show up and go, "Okay, let's look at food and make decisions on, are you feeling, pressured to try this combination of food? Are you feeling excited to try this combination of food?"
Right.
We're hinting at the food mandala here, but, um, yeah, I
And I
mean,
definitely have parties with friends, mixed groups of, like, friends and lovers, where, like, we do stuff like that, right? We have potlucks, we have very intentional food party like fondue parties or something like that, where we're doing that, but it is in a very different container than, like,
context.
yeah, yeah, I am not doing this to vet you or teach you skills to get into a relationship with me. It's not.
Yeah.
No.
I have Betty Martin in my head right now talking about the wheel of consent and how it is a practice and there should be like a start and stop time. It's
Hmm.
like it's like doing like a scene, like a BDSM scene.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You want to know when it starts and when it stops because you're just practicing. And I think as a professional, we have to remember, or I'm say we. I say we. I should say I have to remember that I do not wanna treat my partner as a client.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't wanna be treated as a client either, right?
No.
So, but I
I
also
don't wanna be treated as a teacher,
I
right?
also have this background that reminds me to, like, Michelle. it's okay to let your partner fail, right?
Mhm.
I'm not going to come in and rescue. I have limits. I have figured out for myself the times I will get involved is when it's going to personally affect me. Otherwise, hands off. I'm
Yep.
not here to
Yep, yep,
nag
yep.
or give reminders. It's only when I'm being personally affected do I jump in and throw my executive function into the ring to support my my partner.
Love it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you, Brian.
Yay, thank
We
you,
did
and I'm
it.
I'm sure we're gonna have more conversations.
This was fun because I'm thinking I've listened to a lot of interviews with Brian Gibney, and it's always about work, and it's so cool to
Right? How
just
you
talk
don't you don't you
about.
don't get Brian's personal life a lot,
And
do
this is
you?
what I want to do with this is like bring in my circle and talk more on how does our work relate to our personal life and how we navigate the world outside of work, because I
Mhm.
think it's a lifestyle that we live in,
Yeah.
that we do the work we do and we also live it
Mhm.
outside of our work. It isn't something that just shows up when we walk into session. It's just part
Yeah,
of our
yeah.
DNA.
Yeah, 'cause I could not imagine being any other way at this point in time.
Yeah, yeah, and we just get to practice it over and over again.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Sometimes we
awesome.
get paid for it.
Sometimes we get paid for it. I mean, I think we get paid for it all the time, even without it being a money exchange.
Fair, fair, fair.
Like, I feel like I'm just practicing all the time, and sometimes it's with people that get to pay to have time, right?
Mhm.
But I'm always practicing it with everybody in my life.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yay.
Have a beautiful one, friend. I love you.
I hope you do too. And I
Mwah.
will talk to you later.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you for joining us. If you'd like to comment, pose a question, or learn more about the guests often featured on the show, visit us at intimacylabpodcast.com. Please also take a moment to review us on your favorite podcast app. It's one of the best ways to show your support. As for me, you can find out more about my work at meetmichellerenee.com, as well as on most social medias at meetmichellerenee. Let's connect again soon.